It is official, the writ has dropped and we're going to the polls on October 21st. Joining me now to talk about where the federal leaders are heading is one of our regular political contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me via Skype from Toronto. Mr. Lilley, so here we are. So where are Trudeau, Shearer, Singh and others headed?
Ontario, Quebec, Ontario, Quebec, Ontario, Quebec, and Ontario and Quebec. It's quite a bit of that, although I will say Elizabeth May did start her campaign on Vancouver Island because that's where the Greens have 2 seats. So that's kind of quite literally their beachhead, and they want to expand from there, moving west across the country. But Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader who feels the Greens nipping at his heels, he'd already started his campaign in Toronto on Sunday. That's his natural home turf. He used to be an Ontario New Democrat member of the legislature here before he went on to the federal scene. He, of course, represents a BC riding now, but he did a campaign launch last Sunday in Toronto and then started touring around on his campaign bus. So he was in London, Ontario. That's a place that the New Democrats tend to do well. Southwestern Ontario, it's a lot like parts of British Columbia where they do well, parts of Nova Scotia where they've done well in the past. Those are the areas he's going to be focusing on. The Conservatives started off in Three Rivers, Quebec. Trois-Rivières started there, and then Andrew Shearer flew to Toronto, and he's hosting an event in Vaughan Woodbridge. That's a suburban riding north of Toronto. And the Prime Minister, of course, starting off in Ottawa. He wants to rally candidates there, rally candidates in Montreal, and then fly across the country. But there will be an awful lot of time in Ontario and Quebec because, let's face it, Alberta, pretty much sewn up. It's going to be blue. Saskatchewan, it's going to be blue. Outside of Winnipeg, there's going to be an awful lot of blue with a bit of orange in Manitoba. And Atlantic Canada is mostly going to be, Liberal red. So what are they fighting over? The 2 big provinces that are actually in play. The parties are tight here, unlike most of the country where everyone's settled in their ways.
So many taxpayers are not happy that Justin Trudeau has been making some spending announcements for several weeks now on the taxpayers' dime. But Brian, is that not quite common?
It is in many ways, but not to the degree that Justin Trudeau's been doing it. I mean, we thought that the election was going to be called last Sunday. There was an awful lot of speculation around that, and a couple of things factored into it, including Hurricane Dorian that was hitting the East Coast, was landing in Halifax, and the Liberals could not have called an election there. So what did they do? They hadn't put out any media advisories on spending announcements. As soon as they realized, okay, well, we can't call an election, Halifax is going to get thumped by this hurricane, they put out more spending announcements, and they went into ridings that they're targeting. So I'll give you an example. Down by Windsor, Ontario, where the Chrysler plant is, where Hiram Walker, the home of Canadian Club, that sort of thing, some famous brands there. They've got a bit of a star candidate on their hands. Sandra Pupatello used to be an Ontario Liberal cabinet minister, big in local political circles. She's running for the Liberals. They want to steal that from the NDP, so they send Chrystia Freeland down. They do an official spending announcement with the local union that's going to back the Liberals. They do some roundtables at the university. In every photo, there's Sandra Pupatello standing next to the cabinet minister. So yeah, that's campaigning on our dime. They had several more like that on Monday, the day that they thought they were going to be campaigning. Those were added to the schedule late in the day. Nobody has done it quite to the degree that these guys have. This surpasses anything that I've seen with Chrétien, with Martin, or with Harper.
Brian, according to Bay Street economists, there is talk that the Canadian economy may tank just before the election, and that cannot be good news for whomever is elected on October 21st.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a problem for the governing Liberals if things start to go sour before voting day. And then even if they win, or let's say the Conservatives take over with a minority or a majority, whoever wins, it's going to be a problem. And the big problem is it's not necessarily factors within Canada that are going to lead to this recession. We're seeing a slowdown in the Chinese economy. We're seeing a slowdown in Germany and throughout the greater European Union, not necessarily Britain, where they're dealing with Brexit, but elsewhere. And so that's leading to a global slowdown. The Americans are still doing better than we are in terms of economic growth, but not as fast a pace of growth as they had maybe a year or so ago. So all of that leads to what economists like to call headwinds for the Canadian economy. And, instead of just looking at dealing with something, in the oil patch, we're dealing with problems across the greater economy as things start to slow down. So could be a problem during the election, will definitely be a problem if it comes true after the election for whoever wins on October 21st.
A fight over what Justin Trudeau inherited, including his $1 million Mercedes with the nice gull-wing doors, and how much more middle-class Andrew Shearer was growing up, shows the silliness of online politics. We're seeing it quite a bit, especially on Twitter, Brian. Meanwhile, the Liberals claim Shearer will slash spending, but will not say how.
Yeah, so these are the types of things, most people are going to be focused on. That the question that Ronald Reagan asked, I think, is the best summation. Ronald Reagan asked the question during the 1980 debate against Jimmy Carter as he was seeking to replace Jimmy Carter as the American president. He looked into the camera during one of the debates and he said, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" And that's the question that most Canadians are asking. In the meantime, it was a week or so ago, was questions, will Andrew Scheer reopen abortion? Will he reopen same-sex marriage? Look at what he said in 2005. Now there was a hashtag trending that was being pushed by Liberal partisans, including elected members of Parliament, hashtag Scheer so poor. And this was based off an estimate by a magazine, Maclean's, that said, oh, well, Andrew Scheer likes to say that he was, didn't grow up with wealth, that his family didn't own a car, but we think that his parents would have earned at least $120,000 back in the 80s. Well, people are acting as if that was $120,000 in the 80s, which would have made him very well off. I'm not even sure. I knew Andrew Scheer's mother. She passed away a couple of years ago. I know his father. I don't know that they made that much, even in today's dollars. So for people to turn around and say that, that's where the hashtag Scheer so poor came from. And they were mocking him. Some said they were mocking middle class and low income Canadians at the same time. Well, people retaliated with Trudeau inherited so much because, of course, Justin Trudeau did. Justin Trudeau did inherit $1 million Mercedes. He did inherit a trust fund and a home, beautiful home in Montreal. But he's not like a Bronfman, one of his buddies and fundraisers. He's not on that level of wealth. He wouldn't have to necessarily work all that hard if he decided to leave politics, but he's not that well off that he and his family will live forever without having to work again.
Liberal MP Catherine McKenna is calling for more security. Brian, why is that?
Well, unfortunately, Catherine McKenna has been the brunt of a lot of attacks online for some time. She's been called names like Climate Change Barbie or Climate Barbie. She has been mocked for her appearance. And now apparently the threats have gone from online to offline. And this is really unfortunate. It's a same thing that happened to another female politician that I know, also from the Ottawa area. And funny enough, or strangely enough, it's not funny, strangely enough, I was at a dinner just before I left Ottawa to move down to Toronto for the current gig. I was at the Burn Society, the Ottawa Scottish Society's Burn Supper at the end of January. You eat the haggis and everyone talks in strange accents. And I was there for that, doing one of the accents, doing the address to the haggis. And so I was seated at the head tables with Catherine McKenna. And right across from me was Lisa MacLeod. Both women have had to have security because people have been so outraged over their political positions that they've received death threats. I don't know how serious it's gotten with McKenna, but I'll tell you this because MacLeod is no longer facing those threats. But at one point, everywhere she went, she had a police escort. Even getting on a plane, the police would walk her up the gangplank into the plane, and then another set of police officers would meet her as she got off the plane. That's no way for anyone to live. So regardless of your political viewpoints, we have to be able to have discussions without resorting to threats of violence. No one should have to live that way. We can disagree with each other, Hal, but we do it in a civil and respectful way. That's part of what democracy is all about.
Brian, during a recent TV interview, Green Party leader Elizabeth May was asked who her personal hero was. She said her hero is Jesus Christ. Now, May was asked why. She said, well, it's because he started a revolution in a nonviolent way. She even looks to Jesus for answers. Now, I was a little surprised by that. How about you?
Not surprised at all, but I've been covering federal politics a very long time. I know Elizabeth May a little bit, not a lot, but this is a woman who takes her faith seriously. She is on the progressive side of Christianity. Now, as some people would say, about the Christian church, the church doesn't look left, the church doesn't look right, the church looks up. But let's face it, there are different interpretations of Christianity, and she's on the progressive side of it. Elizabeth May has gone so far as to say that she wants to study to become an ordained Anglican minister. I know she started that process. I don't believe that she's finished it, but she has a very busy job as it is right now. So perhaps that will be her post-political career. This is not something that she takes lightly. And so kudos to her, and I applaud her for saying so.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear. Elizabeth May was apparently slammed recently by a Muslim group for not being strong enough on Bill 21 or the secularism bill in Quebec, Quebec's ban on religious symbols. Can you explain?
Yeah, this is the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and they were holding a town hall with her. Now, she said that she is opposed to the bill, that she denounces the bill, but she wouldn't tell Quebec candidates that they have to denounce the bill or campaign against it, which is basically the same position as all the political party leaders have taken. Look, I think that they should all be campaigning against the bill. I think they should all be denouncing the bill. I'm watching as most of the political party leaders are denouncing what the Ontario Progressive Conservative government of Doug Ford does when it's not about fundamental freedoms such as freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, all of those things that are in the charter. But on this bill in Quebec, which is very popular in Quebec, and we have to remember that it's very popular with the electorate, and these people are now seeking the votes of that same electorate. They are saying they're against it, but they're not campaigning against it the way they would if a conservative politician, say Doug Ford or Jason Kenney or Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, if they had done something similar, they would be denounced day in, day out. They're not doing that because they know that they'll lose votes in the province of Quebec, and they're all basically up for grabs. The NDP has 14 seats. They're probably going down into the single digits. The Liberals are hoping they can pick up between 10 and 20 seats. The Conservatives hoping they can pick up 6 or more. And the Bloc is trying to become resurgent, and of course they would back this. So it's a very strange position for all of the political parties to be in, needing to curry favor with those voters, but also stand for what they are normally defending.
Why are so many making abortion an issue when both Trudeau and Shearer say it really is not?
Well, Justin Trudeau says abortion is a big issue, but he doesn't want to acknowledge that back in 2011, he said he was personally opposed to it, but will defend it. Elizabeth May just said that she will not stop Green Party members from bringing up issues around bills around abortion. Previously, she's gotten in trouble for saying that she's talked to women about abortion in a less than favorable way. She didn't encourage them to go do it. And so activists on the pro-abortion side jumped all over that. So it's a very strange issue that the progressive side tends to bring up to try and beat conservatives down. It's not an issue motivator for most voters. It's not something that the average Canadian goes to the poll on one way or the other. I want to make that clear. There's probably a bit more pro-life side than pro-choice side in terms of saying, well, I'm definitely voting for this party over that party on this issue. But, it can kind of flavor the vote, but it's not the big vote driver. But progressives feel that if they can peel away some votes from the conservatives off this issue, it's worth bringing up every single election. And they do. And, Stephen Harper, outside of saying he wouldn't fund abortion overseas as part of his Millennium Development Goals, he never moved on this issue. That was about the most pro-life thing that he did. And they still turn around and say, this guy is going to end abortion if you vote for him. You can't vote for the conservatives.
A recent Annos poll says when it comes to leading an ethical government, no federal leader has a clear advantage, Brian. That's quite surprising considering the Trudeau Liberals have been through quite a bit. Can you say SNC-Lavalin?
I know. So I think this partly comes down to the idea, to quote Shakespeare, or to paraphrase Shakespeare, a pox on all their houses. People tend to see all politicians in the same light. That's why, sometimes these scandal issues don't necessarily have the impact that a lot of political watchers think they will. Oh, there's a scandal. There's an ethics scandal. Oh, it's going to damage them. Well, a lot of voters just look and say, they're all crooks. What does it matter? And then they defend their guy when they're in an ethics scandal and attack the other guy when they're in an ethics scandal. So there's a bit of that going on there. I also think it comes down to the fact that voters they haven't fully taken the measure of the opposition leaders aside from Justin Trudeau. I'll point to this stat from several polls. You can look at DART, you can look at Ipsos, you can look at others. Asked, does the Trudeau Liberal government deserve to be reelected? It's below where his vote tally is most of the time. And that's the one that Liberals have to worry about. I'll tell you this, Hal, as the election starts, it's chasing the minority right now. That's what we're looking at. We're trying to decide who's going to lead the minority government. We've got a 5.5 week campaign. We'll see if that changes over time. But at this point, as the election begins, it's looking like a minority. Will it be Conservative? Will it be Liberal? Or will the campaign change something and give one of them a majority? We'll see.
Let the games begin. One of our regular political contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me once again via Skype from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.